Ikena and Obinna were close friends from Umwoma village, bound by their school days and shared childhood memories. Every holiday, they returned home to their village, a place surrounded by lush green farmlands and hard-working people. Life in Umwoma was simple, but not easy. Families depended on farming to survive, and children often joined in to help. Ikedi, Ikena's school friend, sometimes visited Umwoma to spend holidays with his friend. Though he didn't know Obinna well, his friendship with Ikena made him feel at home in the village. Then there was Chukwudi, a true son of Umwoma. Unlike the others, he had never been to school. Instead, he spent his days helping his poor parents on their small piece of land. Chukwudi had the strength of someone who had worked hard all his life, and the sharpness of someone who knew how to survive. When the holidays arrived, Ikena and Chukwudi teamed up, as they always did, to look for farm jobs in the area. They were known for being diligent workers, clearing bushes, planting crops, and harvesting yams. These jobs paid in cash, foodstuffs, or both, which helped their families get through tough times. This holiday, the boys wanted to go beyond the usual. Instead of sticking to jobs within Umwoma, they decided to explore neighboring villages like Umuabi and Umuchi. They planned to take up as many jobs as they could and earn enough for the holiday. Their first job in Umuabi was a blessing. The farmer, an elderly man, paid them generously in both cash and food. The boys returned home tired but happy, sharing stories of their hard work and dreams of more opportunities. "This is just the beginning," Kenna said to Chukwudi as they carried sacks of yams home. "If we keep working like this, we'll make enough money to last us even after school resumes." Chukwudi grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "We just need to find the right people to work for. The farmers here in Umwabi seem to pay well." Encouraged by their success, the boys took on a job at the farm of Chidi, a wealthy man in Umwabi. Chidi's land was large and the work was intense, clearing weeds, building ridges and planting maize. "This job will give us a huge profit." The boys worked tirelessly for a week, pushing through the heat and exhaustion. When the week ended, they approached Chidi for their payment, confident that their hard work would be rewarded. But Chidi's response stunned them. "What payment?" he sneered, looking down at them like they were insects. "Get out of my sight before I deal with you." "But we worked for you," Ikena protested, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Chidi's eyes darkened. "Do you think you can come here and make demands? Leave now or you'll regret it." When the boys refused to leave, Chidi grabbed a dagger and charged at them. The sight of the glinting blade in his hands made their hearts race. They dropped everything and ran, narrowly escaping the furious man. Kenna and Chukwudi left Chidi's farm that day feeling humiliated and heartbroken. They couldn't understand why Chidi had treated them so cruelly. They had worked hard, under the scorching sun with no complaints. To be chased off with a cutlass was bad enough, but to then be accused of stealing his farm produce was a wound that cut even deeper. "We swear, Chief, we never and can never do that," Ikena had cried, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. "Lying thieves!" Chidi roared, his face twisted with anger. "If I catch you near my farm again, I'll make sure you regret it." That evening, back in the Umwoma village, Ikena told Obinna everything. Obinna listened intently, anger bubbling in his chest as Ikena narrated Chief Chidi's attitude to him. He couldn't understand how someone could be so heartless. "This is not right," Obinna said firmly. "We can't let him get away with this." "But what can we do?" Ikena asked helplessly. "He's too powerful." Obinna thought for a moment, then leaned closer. "We'll go back to his house tomorrow morning. But this time, we'll carry cutlasses. Let's scare him into paying. If he won't listen to reason, we'll make him listen to fear." Chukudi, sitting nearby, frowned. "I don't think that's a good idea. What if things go wrong? Maybe we should tell our parents, or report him to the king." Obina shook his head. "Do you really think the king will help us? Chidi is a wealthy chief, respected by everyone. They'll believe him over us." Ikenna, still burning with frustration, agreed. "Obina is right. Chidi has shown us wickedness. If we try to play fair, we'll never get justice." Chukwudi was uneasy but didn't push further. The majority had spoken. Later that night, Obina approached Iketi and convinced him to join their plan. "You're our friend," he said. "We need you. We can't let Chidi get away with this." Iskidi agreed to help his friends. At 5 a.m., when the sky was still dark, the 4 boys gathered near Chidi's compound. Each carried a cutlass, though their intention wasn't to harm, but to intimidate. They moved quietly, careful not to wake the neighbors. The air was thick with tension as they approached Chidi's house. They found Chidi sleeping in his room. Without wasting time, they grabbed him and pulled him up. His eyes shot open in shock as he saw the boys holding cutlasses. He squinted at the boys, then clung to them as they held them together. "Give us our money," Ikenna demanded, his voice low but firm. "We worked hard for it, and you know it." Chidi's mouth fell open in disbelief. "Thieves!" he shouted. "You've come to kill me." "We are not thieves," Ikenna said, his hands trembling. "We only want what you owe us." Before they could explain further, the noise woke Chidi's farmhands and family members. Within minutes, the house was filled with people. The boys tried to hold their ground, still demanding their payment. But Chidi screamed again, louder this time. "They're after my life. They want my properties and my money." The farmhands and villagers didn't hesitate. Chidi was a respected chief, and they trusted his word without question. To them, the sight of 4 boys holding him with cutlasses was proof enough of guilt. "You want to kill Chief Chidi?" one of the farmhands shouted, his face twisted with anger. "We'll show you." Before the boys could defend themselves, they were swarmed. Blows rained down on them from every direction. Fists, sticks, and anything else the mob could grab. The boys screamed, pleading for someone to listen, but no one cared to hear their side of the story. "Chief Chidi can never lie," someone shouted. "These boys are criminals." The beating continued until the boys were too weak to move. Bloodied and bruised, they were dragged to the village square. At 6 a.m., the unthinkable happened. The crowd, in their fury, set the boys on fire. Their screams echoed through the village, but no one stepped forward to save them. To the villagers, they were criminals who had tried to rob and kill a respected chief. Justice, in their eyes, had been served. The news spread quickly. By midday, neighboring villages like Umwabi and Umuchi had heard of the 4 boys who were burned to death for allegedly trying to rob Chief Chidi. Most people accepted the story without question, believing that Chidi, a man of wealth and status, couldn't possibly lie. The evening turned to night in Umoma village, and the Igwe household was filled with unease. Mr. and Mrs. Igwe, Chukwudi's parents, sat outside their small mud house, watching the dark sky anxiously. The firewood Mrs. Igwe had been used to cooking dinner was long burnt out, but her son Chukwudi had still not returned home. "Where is Chukwudi?" Mrs. Igwe muttered to herself, pacing back and forth. "He always comes back before sunset. What is keeping him this late?" Mr. Igwe tried to reassure her, though he was equally worried. "Don't worry too much. Maybe he's with his friends, those boys he always works with during the holidays." But when the hours dragged on and Chukwudi still didn't come home, worry turned into panic. Mr. Igwe decided to visit the families of Ikena Ubinna to see if their son was with them. The stories turn the same. The families are looking for their sons too. By midnight, the families of the boys had gathered together, their faces etched with fear. The boys were missing, and no one had any idea where they could be. They had heard about the death of 4 criminals at Umuobi village, but they could not trace it to their sons, because it can't be possible. As the day went on and the boys still didn't return, their families grew more convinced that the worst had happened. With no other options, they decided to take the matter to their king, the respected ruler of their village. The families knelt before the king, their voices trembling with grief. Mr. Igwe spoke on behalf of the others. "Your Highness," he began, "our sons have been missing since yesterday. We have reason to believe they are the 4 boys who were killed in Umawami. Chukwudi once told me that he once got a job offer at Umawami village. Please, Your Highness, help us. We need answers." The king sent a message to the king of Umubi, demanding a clear report on the death of the 4 boys. The king, not knowing much about it, called Chidi to narrate his experience with the 4 boys. Chidi straightened, his voice steady. "Your Majesty, the boys came to my house early in the morning, carrying cutlasses. They grabbed me and demanded money. They were thieves, Your Majesty, and they threatened my life." The king's eyes narrowed slightly. "And how did they end up dead?" Chidi hesitated before answering. "When I called for help, my farmhands and neighbors rushed in to defend me. The boys were overpowered, and the people were angry. They said, 'The boys must pay for their crime,' and things got out of hand." The king leaned forward. "Got out of hand? Chief Chidi, are you saying that the crowd acted without your orders?" Chidi nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I had no control over their actions." The king's expression remained unreadable. In the end, with no evidence, he concluded that the boys were thieves. Chief Chidi was a man of influence, but deep down, he knew he was in trouble. The truth of what happened between him and the boys could destroy him. To save himself, he twisted the story, labeling the 4 boys as criminals who had come to rob and kill him. He never mentioned the real incident, the boys coming to demand their payment for the work they did on his farm. He kept that part buried. The problem, however, was that the boys had not told their families about working for Chidi. Ikena and Chukwudi hadn't mentioned anything to their parents about the unpaid job, so there was no way for their families to connect the dots. Without solid evidence, the case grew cold, and the villagers began to move on, hoping that somehow the boys would return home someday. As the weeks passed, the situation remained unresolved. The holiday came to an end, and families began to prepare for life as usual. Mr. and Mrs. Orji, Ike's parents, expected their son to return home to the city after the holidays, but he never came. At first, they thought there might be a delay, but after a month with no word from him, they grew anxious. One fateful day, they decided to travel to Umoima village to find out what was happening. When they arrived, they were greeted with a heartbreaking revelation. Ikedi, along with 3 other boys, had been missing for over a month. Worse still, the villagers shared the haunting tale of 4 boys burned alive in Umoima village, accused of being criminals, and this event happened the same day the boys went missing. Mrs. Orji broke down in tears upon hearing this. "No, my son is not a thief," she cried, her voice echoing through the compound. "Iketi would never rob anyone. He is a good boy." Mr. Orji clenched his fists in anger. "We demand answers. How could this happen? Who gave them the right to kill those boys without proper investigation?" But the villagers could provide no answers. The story was shrouded in doubt and confusion, and without any evidence to prove that the burned boys were Ikedi and his friends. Refusing to accept defeat, Mr. and Mrs. Orji decided to escalate the matter. They reported the case to the state police, demanding a full investigation into the deaths of the 4 boys in Umobi village. The authorities listened, and within 12 hours, a team of officers arrested Chief Chidi and several of his farmhands. At the police station, Chidi was charged with taking the law into his own hands and burning the boys' bodies before sunrise, making it impossible to identify them. The police accused him of intentionally covering up the truth to avoid accountability. A search was conducted at Chidi's house, and during the search a shocking discovery was made. A golden necklace belonging to Ikedi. It was a precious piece that belonged to Ikedi's mother before he travelled down to the village to see Obina. Chidi admitted that he had taken the necklace during the beating, knowing it was valuable. When the families were informed about the discovery, they broke down in tears. There was no longer any doubt. The boys who had been beaten and burned were their sons. The family's pain deepened as they realized the extent of Chidi's cruelty. With the evidence mounted against him, Chidi was taken to court for trial. The families of the boys were present, along with villagers from both Umuama and Umobi. The courtroom was packed as everyone awaited the outcome of the case. Under pressure from the prosecution and the evidence presented, Chidi finally broke down and confessed. He admitted that the boys had come to his house to demand payment for their work on his farm. He explained how they had threatened him with cutlasses, but instead of handling the situation properly, he had escalated it, calling for his farmhands and neighbours to attack them. Chidi confessed to ordering the mob to beat the boys and burn their bodies in the village square. He also admitted to taking Ikena's golden necklace during the chaos, knowing its worth. His words sent a wave of anger and sorrow through the courtroom. When it was time for the judgment, the judge showed no mercy. Chidi was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labour for his crimes. His farmhands, who participated in the mob attack, were also sentenced to prison for 20 years. As the families left the courtroom, tears streamed down their faces. The memory of their sons would forever haunt them. But they found some comfort in knowing that the truth had finally been revealed, and Chidi would pay for his wickedness. The tragic deaths of Ikena, Obina, Chikudi, and Ikedi caused a rift that tore apart the peace between Umuama and Umoabi villages. For weeks, the violence continued. Clashes broke out on different occasions, often leaving people injured and properties damaged. The elders of both villages tried to calm things down, but the wounds caused by the death of the 4 boys were too deep. Umuama demanded justice, not just for the boys, but for the harm done to their reputation. In Umuoma, the story of Ikena, Obina, Chukudi, and Ikedi became a painful tale passed down from one generation to the next. The villagers mourned the loss of their young sons, who had died in such a cruel and unjust manner. To honour their memory, the village decided to build statues of the boys at the entrance of Umuoma. The statues were simple but powerful. Each boy was carved with a look of determination on his face, symbolising their fight for justice. Beneath the statues, a plaque was placed with the words, "Memory of Ikena, Obina, Chukudi, and Ikedi." The statues became a source of strength for the people of Umuauma, a reminder of the pain they endured and the need to protect their own. The story of the 4 boys left deep scars, but it also taught important lessons that both villages would carry for generations. They were to become the disciples of their faithful mother. 1. Violence is not the answer. The tragedy began with misunderstandings and escalated because of violence. If Chief Chidi had listened to the boys, or the boys sought help from the elders, the situation might have been resolved peacefully. Violence only breeds more pain and loss. 2. Justice must be fair and thorough. The mob in Umwabi acted without investigating the truth. They relied on assumptions and the words of a powerful man, leading to the death of 4 innocent boys. Justice should be based on facts, not emotions or status. The truth will always come to light. Chief Chidi tried to cover up the truth, but in the end, it was revealed, and he faced the consequences of his actions. This shows that lies and deceit will never triumph over the truth. If you love this story and wish to get more real-life stories from us, like and comment your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you will get notified when we release new real-life stories.